The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after dawn, and Olivia Edwards knew whoever was coming would mean trouble, because nothing good ever arrived at her ranch anymore. She stood on the sagging porch of her ranch house, shielding her eyes against the New Mexico sun as it climbed higher over white oaks. The stranger rode slowly, deliberately, a tall figure on a bay horse that looked as travel-worn as its rider probably felt. Olivia's hand instinctively moved to the rifle leaning against the doorframe. Since Thomas died 6 months ago, she had learned to greet every visitor with suspicion. The rider drew closer, and she could make out more details. A man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty brown hat pulled low over his face. His clothes were road-worn but well-kept, the kind a working cowboy wore when he took pride in himself but couldn't afford vanity. As he approached the fence line, he slowed his horse to a walk, raising one hand in a peaceful gesture. "Madam," he called out, his voice carrying across the dry yard, "I don't mean any trouble, just looking for work and a place to rest my horse." Olivia stepped to the edge of the porch, the rifle now held loosely in both hands, not quite pointed at him but present enough to make her position clear. "I'm not hiring," she said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion that seemed to seep into her bones these days. "And I don't have room for drifters." The man stopped his horse about 20 feet from the porch, close enough for conversation but respectful of her space. He pushed back his hat, revealing a weathered face that she guessed put him somewhere in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. His eyes were a startling blue, the kind that seemed out of place in this harsh landscape, and they studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Name's Ethan Vance," he said. "And I can see from here you've got a fence that needs mending, a barn door hanging off its hinges, and from the way that windmill's creaking, it'll seize up completely in another week." He paused, then added, "With respect, madam, you need help whether you want to admit it or not." Heat rushed to Olivia's face, and she wasn't sure if it was anger or embarrassment. Everything he said was true. The ranch had been falling apart since before Thomas died, and his death had only accelerated the decay. She worked from sunup to sundown every day, but there was always more to do than one person could manage, even one as stubborn as she was. "I said I'm not hiring," she repeated, her voice harder now. "I can't pay wages, Mr. Vance, and I don't take charity. So I'd appreciate it if you'd move along." Ethan Vance sat quietly on his horse for a long moment, his gaze moving from the broken fence to the sagging barn, then back to her face. Something in his expression softened. "I don't need wages right now," he said. "I need a place to stay for a while. Somewhere quiet. You give me a roof and meals and I'll do the work that needs doing. When I'm ready to move on, we'll call it even." "No," Olivia said immediately. The thought of having a stranger on her property, a man she didn't know, made her stomach knot with anxiety. After Thomas's death, she had grown accustomed to the solitude, even found a strange comfort in it. "I don't need your help. You do, though." Ethan's voice was gentle but insistent, "and I think you know it. That barn door comes off in the next strong wind and you'll lose whatever you're storing in there. That fence won't hold cattle much longer. And when that windmill stops, what are you going to do for water?" She wanted to tell him to leave, to ride back down that dusty road and find someone else to help. But the truth of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She was drowning here, sinking under the weight of responsibilities she couldn't meet alone. Pride had kept her going these 6 months, pride and the stubborn determination not to lose what Thomas had built. But pride wouldn't fix fences or repair barn doors. "I told you, I can't pay you," she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "And I told you, I don't need wages." Ethan dismounted, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible, the way a man approaches a skittish horse. Just room and board, madam. That's all I'm asking. Olivia studied him, trying to read the truth in his face. She had always been good at reading people, something her father had taught her when she was young. Ethan Vance looked tired, she realized, tired in a way that went deeper than just physical exhaustion. There was a weight in his eyes that she recognized because she carried the same weight herself. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you work for just room and board when you could ride into White Oaks and find paying work?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because sometimes a man needs a place where nobody knows his name or his business. A place to work hard and think quietly. You're offering that even if you don't realize it." There was truth in his words, but also mystery, and mystery made Olivia nervous. Still, as she looked past him at her failing ranch, she felt something inside her give way. She was so tired. Tired of fighting every day just to maintain what she had. Tired of going to bed each night knowing she was falling further behind. Tired of the loneliness that pressed in on her when darkness fell. 2 weeks, she heard herself say. You can stay 2 weeks. After that, you move on. Ethan nodded slowly. 2 weeks, he agreed. Where should I put my horse? There's a stall in the barn that's still good. You can sleep in the small room off the tack room. It's not much, but it's dry. She paused, then added, I eat breakfast at dawn, supper at sunset. You're welcome to join me, or you can cook for yourself. There's a stove in the bunkhouse. I appreciate it, madam. Ethan gathered his horse's reins and started toward the barn, then stopped and turned back. Might I ask your name? Olivia. Olivia Edwards. She didn't mention that she was a widow, though the black dress she wore probably told him as much. Mrs. Edwards, he said with a slight nod, then led his horse away. Olivia watched him go, a mixture of relief and apprehension churning in her stomach. She had just invited a stranger onto her property, into her life, and she had no idea if she had made a terrible mistake. But the decision was made now, and Olivia Edwards had never been one to second-guess herself once a course was set. She turned and went back into the house, setting the rifle back in its place beside the door. Through the window, she could see Ethan leading his horse into the barn, his movements careful and practiced. He moved like a man who knew his way around horses and hard work, which was something at least. The house felt emptier than usual as she moved through it, preparing her simple breakfast of coffee and cornbread. She had grown used to the silence after Thomas died, but somehow having another person on the property made the quiet inside the house feel more pronounced. She could hear small sounds from the barn, the soft murmur of Ethan's voice as he talked to his horse, the creak of wood as he moved around. When she stepped back outside an hour later, Ethan was already at work on the fence. He had stripped down to his shirt. His vest and jacket hung carefully on a fence post, and he was pulling out the rotted sections of wood with steady, efficient movements. His horse grazed peacefully in the small paddock beside the barn, and a battered set of tools lay spread on the ground beside him. Olivia meant to go about her own work, but she found herself walking toward him instead. He looked up as she approached, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. You weren't lying about that fence, he said. Half these posts are rotted through. I'll need to replace them, not just patch them. I have some lumber in the back of the barn, she said. Thomas ordered it last year before. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Ethan's expression gentled with understanding. I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Can't be easy running this place alone. It's not, she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. She usually kept her struggles private, her pride not allowing her to show weakness. But I manage. I can see that. He gestured at the ranch around them. Place is still standing, animals are still fed. That takes strength. His words touched something in her that had been cold for months. When had anyone last acknowledged what she was doing, how hard she was fighting? The neighbors had come around after Thomas died, bringing food and condolences, but their visits had tapered off quickly. People had their own struggles. They couldn't be expected to carry hers too. "How long were you married?" Ethan asked, then quickly added, "I apologize if that's too personal a question." 5 years, Olivia said. "We met in Santa Fe. He was working as a ranch hand and I was teaching school. He dreamed of having his own place, and when this ranch came available, we scraped together everything we had to buy it." She looked around at the property, remembering how it had looked when they first arrived, full of promise despite its rough condition. "We had plans, so many plans." "What happened to him, if you don't mind me asking?" "Horse threw him during a storm. He hit his head on a rock. Was gone before I could even get him back to the house." The words came out flat, emotionless, because that was the only way she could say them without breaking down. "It was 6 months ago tomorrow." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his hand still on the fence post he'd been working. "That's a hard thing to carry," he said finally. "Losing someone sudden like that." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "You sound like you know something about loss." His jaw tightened, and she saw a flash of pain cross his face before he shuddered it away. "Most people do, I expect," he said, not quite answering the question. He turned back to the fence, clearly signaling that the subject was closed. Olivia recognized the boundary he'd set and respected it. She had her own wounds she didn't want to expose. She could understand his need for privacy. "I'll be working in the garden if you need anything," she said, then walked away, feeling his eyes on her back as she went. The day passed in focused work. Olivia tended to her vegetable garden, pulling weeds and checking the irrigation ditches that brought precious water from the windmill. The garden was her pride, one of the few things on the ranch she had managed to keep thriving. The vegetables fed her through the year, and she sold the surplus in town for the little cash she had. As she worked, she found herself frequently glancing toward where Ethan labored on the fence. He worked steadily, methodically, the kind of focused work that spoke of both skill and determination. By midday, he had replaced an entire section of fence, the new posts standing straight and strong where the old rotted ones had been. When the sun reached its peak, Olivia brought him a jar of cool water from the spring house. He accepted it gratefully, drinking deeply before handing it back. "You have a good spring," he observed. "That's worth more than gold in this country. It's what made Thomas choose this property. Even in drought years, it's never run dry." She paused, then added, "There's bread and cheese in the house if you're hungry." "I appreciate that, madam, but I brought my own provisions. Don't want to eat up your stores." "I offered," she said, a bit more sharply than she intended. "I don't say things I don't mean, Mr. Vance." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I can see that about you." "All right then, I'll take you up on that bread and cheese." They ate in silence on the porch, the midday heat pressing down on them. Olivia found the silence comfortable rather than awkward, which surprised her. She had expected to feel uncomfortable having a stranger here, but there was something quietly reassuring about Ethan's presence. He didn't fill the air with unnecessary words or pry into her business. He simply existed alongside her, solid and calm. "This is good bread," he said after a while. "You make it yourself, every few days. Can't afford to buy it in town, and besides, I prefer my own." She looked at him sideways. "Where are you from, Mr. Vance?" Here and there. "Been moving around for a while now." He gazed out at the horizon, his expression distant. "Colorado last, before that Kansas. Haven't really had a place to call home for some time." "What made you leave Colorado?" His jaw tightened again, that same flash of pain she'd seen earlier. "Sometimes staying in a place hurts more than leaving," he said quietly. Sometimes you need to be somewhere nobody knows your face or your past. Olivia understood that feeling better than he probably realized. After Thomas died, she had considered selling the ranch and moving away, starting fresh somewhere nobody knew her as the widow Edwards. But in the end, she couldn't do it. This land held her memories, both painful and precious, and abandoning it would have felt like abandoning Thomas himself. "Well," she said, standing and brushing crumbs from her skirt, "you'll find White Oaks is a small town. People will know you're here by nightfall, and they'll have a dozen theories about who you are and what you're running from by tomorrow." "Let them talk," Ethan said with a shrug. "I've heard worse than small-town gossip." The afternoon wore on, and Ethan continued working on the fence while Olivia turned her attention to the chickens and the 3 cows that were all that remained of what had once been a larger herd. She had sold most of the cattle after Thomas died, unable to manage them alone and needing the money. These 3 she kept for milk and the occasional calf to sell. As sunset approached, Olivia went inside to prepare supper. She made more than usual, enough for 2, though she told herself it was only practical. The man was working hard. He needed to eat. She made beans and cornbread, simple fare but filling, and set 2 places at the small kitchen table. When she called him in, Ethan appeared in the doorway, having washed up at the pump outside. His hair was damp and pushed back from his face, and she noticed for the first time that he was actually quite handsome beneath the road dust and exhaustion. The thought made her uncomfortable, and she busied herself serving the food. "Smells wonderful," Ethan said as he sat down. "Been a while since I had a proper meal. How long have you been on the road?" 3 weeks, give or take. Left Colorado in early April. He took a bite of beans and closed his eyes briefly in appreciation. "This is real good, Mrs. Edwards, thank you." They ate in silence for a while, but it was Olivia who broke it this time. "You got about a third of the fence done today. At that pace, you'll have it finished in a week." "That's the plan. Then I'll move on to that barn door and after that the windmill." He looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. "2 weeks won't be enough time to fix everything that needs fixing here, Mrs. Edwards. You know that, right?" "I know," she said quietly, "but it's what we agreed to. Agreements can be changed. I could stay longer if you needed." "No." The word came out too quickly, too firmly, and she saw him draw back slightly. She took a breath and softened her tone. "2 weeks is what I can manage, Mr. Vance. I appreciate the work you're doing, but I can't have a stranger living on my property indefinitely." "I understand," he said, but she could see the question in his eyes. He wanted to ask why, wanted to understand her resistance, but to his credit, he didn't push. After supper, Ethan excused himself and headed back to his small room in the barn. Olivia cleaned up the dishes, then sat on the porch as the sun set, something she did every evening. This was the hardest time of day, when the work was done and there was nothing left but the silence and her thoughts. Tonight, though, the silence felt different. She could see a light burning in the barn, could imagine Ethan settling in for the night. The knowledge that she wasn't completely alone on the property brought a comfort she hadn't expected and didn't entirely want to acknowledge. The next day fell into a similar pattern. Ethan worked on the fence. Olivia tended to her own chores. They shared meals and brief conversations. He asked about the property, about what crops grew well in the area, about the town of White Oaks. She answered his questions but didn't volunteer much more, and he seemed content with that. On the 3rd day, as Olivia was hanging laundry, she saw a wagon approaching from town. She recognized it as belonging to Martha Preston, one of the town's most devoted gossips, and a woman who had made it her mission to find Olivia a new husband since approximately 2 months after Thomas died. "Good morning, Olivia," Martha called out as she climbed down from her wagon, a basket covered with a cloth in her arms. "I brought you some preserves, and I wanted to see how you were managing." "I'm managing fine, Martha, same as always." Olivia wiped her hands on her apron, already tense. Martha's visits always left her feeling exhausted and defensive. "I heard you've taken on help," Martha said, her eyes scanning the property until they landed on Ethan, who was working near the barn. "A man," they said. "I had to come see for myself. He's a drifter who needed work. He's helping with some repairs for a couple of weeks, then he'll move on." Olivia kept her voice level, not wanting to give Martha any ammunition for gossip. "A drifter?" Martha's eyebrows rose. "Olivia, is that wise? A young woman alone out here with a strange man. People will talk." "People always talk, Martha. They talked when I married Thomas, they talked when he died. They'll probably talk when I'm dead too. I'm not going to run my life based on what the town thinks." Martha's expression turned sympathetic, the look that Olivia had come to dread. "I know it's hard, dear. But you must think of propriety. A woman in your position can't be too careful about her reputation." Before Olivia could respond, Ethan approached, having apparently noticed the visitor. He removed his hat politely. "Morning, madam," he said to Martha. "Ethan Vance, I'm helping Mrs. Edwards with some repair work around the ranch." Martha looked him up and down with obvious assessment. "Martha Preston. I run the general store in town." She paused, then added with false sweetness, "We don't get many strangers in White Oaks. Where did you say you were from?" "I didn't say," Ethan replied pleasantly, but with a firmness that made it clear he wouldn't be pressed for more information. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get back to work. Mrs. Edwards is only giving me 2 weeks, so I've got to make the most of them." He nodded to both women and walked back to his work. Martha watched him go, her eyes narrow with speculation. "He's trouble, Olivia. Mark my words. A man that good-looking and that secretive. He's running from something." "Even if he is, it's not my concern," Olivia said, though Martha's words had struck a nerve. She had wondered the same thing herself. "He's doing good work, he's respectful, and in less than 2 weeks he'll be gone. That's all that matters." After Martha left, taking her preserves and her opinions with her, Olivia found herself walking over to where Ethan was working. He looked up as she approached, wiping sweat from his face. "I apologize for Martha," she said. "She means well, but she's got more opinions than sense sometimes." "No need to apologize. Every town has a Martha." He hammered in another nail, then said, "She's right about one thing, though. People will talk about me being here. Let them talk." He smiled slightly. "That's what I said. Seems we're of the same mind on that score." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, then Olivia asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Are you running from something, Mr. Vance?" He didn't answer right away, his hand stilling on the fence post. "Running from or running to," he said finally. "Does it matter which?" "It might. If there's trouble following you, I have a right to know." "There's no trouble following me. No law, no angry husbands, no gambling debts, nothing like that." He met her eyes directly. "I left a place where I couldn't be any more. That's the honest truth, Mrs. Edwards. Whether you believe it or not is up to you." She studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but found only a deep weariness and a pain she recognized. "I believe you," she said, "but the offer still stands for only 2 weeks. I know." Something in his expression looked almost sad. 2 weeks. The days began to blur together in a rhythm of work and meals and quiet evenings. Ethan finished the fence and moved on to the barn door, which required more extensive repairs than expected. He worked long hours, often starting before dawn and finishing after sunset, as if trying to cram as much work as possible into his limited time. Olivia found herself watching him more than she should, found herself thinking about him when she should have been focused on other things. There was something compelling about the way he moved, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. And there was something else too, something she didn't want to name, a awareness that grew stronger each day. On the seventh day, Ethan asked if he could borrow a horse to ride into town for supplies. "I need some parts for the windmill," he explained, "and I'm running low on tobacco." "Take the mare," Olivia said. "She's gentle, and here." She counted out some coins from her small store of money. "For the parts?" "I can pay for them myself," Ethan said. "You're doing work for me. The least I can do is pay for the materials." She pressed the coins into his hand, her fingers brushing against his palm. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she pulled back quickly. If Ethan noticed, he didn't show it. "I'll be back by afternoon," he said. While he was gone, Olivia found the house unbearably quiet. She tried to busy herself with work, but her mind kept wandering to town, to Ethan riding down the main street, to what he might say if anyone asked him questions. Would he defend her reputation? Would he tell people the truth about their arrangement, or would he let them think what they wanted? And why did she care so much what he said? She was hanging more laundry when she heard horses approaching. Too many horses to be just Ethan returning. Her stomach knotted with anxiety as she recognized the three riders, Carl Morrison and his two sons, Pete and Danny. Carl owned the largest ranch in the area, and he had made no secret of his interest in acquiring her property ever since Thomas died. "Afternoon, Olivia," Carl said as he reined in his horse. He was a big man, running to fat in middle age with a red face and shrewd eyes. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." "I'm doing fine, Carl. What do you want?" She had no patience for social niceties with Carl Morrison. He didn't make friendly visits, he made calculated ones. "Heard you've got a drifter working for you. That's interesting, seeing as how last time I offered to send some of my men over to help with repairs, you turned me down flat." "That's right, I did. Because your help comes with strings attached, and we both know it." Carl's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Olivia, that's not fair. I'm just trying to be neighborly. You're a woman alone out here trying to run a ranch. It's not sustainable, and you know it. My offer still stands. I'll give you a fair price for this place, and you can move into town, live comfortable. I've told you before, Carl, this ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale for the right price." He looked around the property with obvious assessment. "Though I'll admit, with all the repairs that need doing, the price has gone down considerable from what it was 6 months ago." Anger flared hot in Olivia's chest. "Get off my property, Carl. You're not welcome here." "Just trying to help," Carl said, but there was a threatening edge to his voice now. "You can't hold onto this place forever, Olivia. Eventually, you'll have to face reality. And when you do, I'll still be here, ready to take this land off your hands, though my offer gets lower every month you wait." "I said leave." Olivia's hand moved toward the rifle she had leaned against the fence post, a habit she had developed whenever she worked outside. Carl's eyes followed her movement, and his expression hardened. "That's no way to treat a neighbor, Olivia. You might want to think about that. Woman alone out here needs friends, not enemies." "Is there a problem here?" They all turned to see Ethan riding up the road, sitting easy in the saddle but with an alertness in his posture that suggested he was ready for trouble. He reined in the mare near the group, his eyes moving from Olivia to Carl and his sons. "No problem," Carl said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Just having a conversation with Mrs. Edwards about the future of her ranch. Seems like Mrs. Edwards wants the conversation to be over," Ethan observed mildly. He dismounted, standing near Olivia in a way that wasn't quite protective but somehow felt that way. "And it's her property, so I expect her wishes should be respected." Carl's face reddened. "I don't believe we've met." "Carl Morrison." I own the Circle M Ranch, biggest spread in the area. Ethan Vance. Ethan's tone was polite but cool. I'm helping Mrs. Edwards with some repairs. So I heard. Carl looked between them, and Olivia could see the speculation in his eyes, the conclusions he was drawing. Well, Vance, you might want to know what you're getting into here. This ranch is failing. Has been since before Edwards died. You're putting work into a place that won't be standing this time next year. That's Mrs. Edwards's concern, not mine or yours, Ethan said. I'm just here to fix fences and barn doors. The tension stretched tight between the men. Carl's sons had moved their horses closer, flanking their father, and Olivia felt her heart pounding. She didn't want violence, but Carl Morrison was the kind of man who was used to getting his way, and he didn't take well to being challenged. Come on, boys, Carl said finally. We've got real work to do. He looked at Olivia. My offer stands, Olivia, but it won't stand forever. You do well to remember that. They rode off, kicking up dust, and Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking, and she clasped them together to hide it. You all right? Ethan asked quietly. I'm fine. That's not the first time Carl's come around trying to pressure me into selling. She looked at him. Thank you for stepping in. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. His expression was serious. Mrs. Edwards, is Morrison dangerous? Will he cause real trouble? I don't know. He's pushy and manipulative, but I never thought he'd actually do anything violent. She paused, fear creeping into her voice. But lately, there have been some things. A section of fence cut that I thought was just wear. Some tools that went missing. Water diverted from one of my irrigation ditches. I told myself it was just bad luck, but now I'm not so sure. Ethan's jaw tightened. If Morrison's sabotaging your property to force you into selling, that's more than just pushy. That's criminal. But I can't prove it, and even if I could, the sheriff in White Oaks is Carl's brother-in-law. I'd get no help there. Then we'll have to make sure nothing else goes wrong. Ethan looked around the property with new eyes, assessing it not just for repair needs but for security. I'll start sleeping lighter, keeping an ear out for trouble. That's not your problem, Olivia protested. You signed on to fix fences, not to be my guard. Maybe not, but I'm not going to stand by while someone tries to run you off your own land. He met her eyes, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. You're trying to hold onto something here, something that matters. I respect that, and I'll help however I can. You have 4 days left, she reminded him, though her voice was softer now. Then you'll be gone. 4 days then. But something in the way he said it made her think he was no more convinced of that timeline than she was. That night, Olivia lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Ethan's words. About the way he had stood beside her when Carl Morrison was threatening her. About the quiet strength he brought to her property, a sense of security she hadn't felt since Thomas died. She thought about his hands, calloused and strong, fixing everything they touched. She thought about his voice, low and calm, never pushing but always steady. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't noticing, with something in his eyes that made her heart race. And then she thought about Thomas, about the guilt she felt for having these thoughts about another man. Thomas had been dead only 6 months. What kind of woman was she, to be thinking about another man so soon? But the thoughts kept coming anyway, unwelcome but persistent. And late that night, when she heard the soft sound of footsteps outside, heard Ethan making a quiet patrol around the property, she felt something warm unfold in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning, Olivia woke with determination. She needed to put some distance between herself and Ethan, needed to remember that he was temporary, that in 3 days he would be gone and she would be alone again. Letting herself get attached would only lead to pain. She kept to herself that day, speaking to Ethan only when necessary, avoiding the shared meals they had fallen into the habit of having. If he noticed the change, he didn't comment on it, just continued his work with the same quiet focus. By evening, the windmill was fixed, turning smoothly and pumping water with a steady rhythm. Ethan stood beside it, watching it work, and Olivia found herself walking over despite her resolution to keep her distance. "You did good work," she said. "Thank you. Should run smooth now for years as long as you keep it greased." He looked at her, his expression questioning. "Did I do something to offend you, Mrs. Edwards? You've been avoiding me all day." "No, you didn't." She struggled to find words for feelings she didn't fully understand herself. "I just think maybe we were getting a little too comfortable with each other. You'll be leaving soon, and I need to remember that. And if I didn't leave—" The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility and danger. "You said 2 weeks was what you needed," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "That hasn't changed." "Maybe it has." He took a step closer, and she could see the vulnerability in his eyes now, the hope and fear mixed together. "Maybe I've found a reason to stay." "Don't," she said, but the word came out as almost a plea. "Don't say things like that." "Why not if they're true?" "Because I'm not ready to hear them. Because my husband has been dead for 6 months and I'm still wearing black. Because you're a drifter with a past you won't talk about, and I'm a widow trying to save a failing ranch. Because there are 100 reasons this doesn't make sense." "I know all that," Ethan said quietly, "but I also know that I haven't felt this alive in 2 years. That when I'm working on this ranch, fixing what's broken, I feel like maybe I'm fixing something in myself too. That when I see you, I see a woman with more strength and courage than anyone I've ever met, and it makes me want to be stronger and braver too." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know you get up before dawn every day and work until your hands bleed. I know you're fighting to hold onto this place even though everyone tells you to give up. I know you loved your husband and you're honoring his memory by refusing to let go of his dream." He paused. "And I know that sometimes when you think I'm not looking, you smile at something small, a flower blooming or a bird singing, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Stop," she whispered, but she didn't move away. "Please stop." "Tell me you don't feel it too," Ethan said, his voice low and intense. "Tell me I'm alone in this and I'll pack up tonight and leave. I'll finish out my 2 weeks somewhere down the road and you'll never see me again. But if there's any chance you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, tell me that instead." Olivia looked up at him, at this man who had appeared on her horizon just over a week ago and somehow turned her carefully controlled life upside down. She could lie. She could send him away and go back to her lonely existence, safe in her grief and her solitude, or she could tell the truth. "I feel it," she said, the words barely audible. "God help me, I feel it too. But that doesn't mean we should act on it. It doesn't mean this is right." "Why isn't it right?" Ethan asked. "Two people finding comfort in each other, finding hope in each other. What's wrong with that? Everything. Nothing. I don't know." She pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. "It's too soon. People will talk. And you're still planning to leave, aren't you? Even after all this, you're still going to drift on down the road eventually." "I don't have to," he said. "I could stay. If you wanted me to stay, I would." "But why would you? What are you running from, Ethan? What's the pain I see in your eyes?" "If we're going to talk about this, about feelings and staying and any of it, I need to know the truth about who you are." He looked away, his jaw working. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer, that he would retreat behind the walls he had built around his past. But then he began to speak, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I had a wife," he said. "Her name was Sarah. We had a small ranch in Colorado, nothing fancy, but it was ours. We were married 3 years, and every day I thanked God for her. She was everything good in my life." He paused, swallowing hard. 2 years ago, she got sick. Fever came on sudden, and nothing we did could break it. She died in 3 days, and I couldn't do anything but hold her hand and watch her slip away. "Oh, Ethan," Olivia breathed, her heart breaking for him. "After she died, I tried to keep the ranch going, but everywhere I looked I saw her. Her garden, her kitchen, the chair she used to sit in to watch the sunset. I couldn't breathe there anymore. So I sold it and started riding, trying to outrun the grief. Been moving ever since, working here and there but never staying long, because staying meant feeling and I didn't want to feel anymore." He looked at her then, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "But then I came here and I saw you, fighting so hard to hold onto your place, refusing to let grief destroy what you and your husband built together. And something in me woke up. I started to feel again, started to hope again. Started to think maybe I could have a life again instead of just existing." Olivia reached out without thinking, taking his hand in hers. His fingers were rough and warm, and they closed around hers with gentle strength. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I can't imagine what that must have been like." "You can, though. You lost your husband, too. You know what it's like to have half of yourself torn away." "I do," she admitted. "And I know what it's like to feel guilty for moving forward, for having moments when you're not drowning in grief. For thinking about someone else and feeling like you're betraying the person you lost." They stood there in the fading light, hands clasped, two wounded people finding unexpected connection in each other's pain. And slowly, Olivia felt something shift inside her, some locked door beginning to open. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can be what you need, or if this is too soon, or if we're just two lonely people mistaking comfort for something more." "We might be," Ethan acknowledged. "I can't promise you I'm not broken beyond repair. Can't promise I'll be any good at loving someone again. But I know I want to try. I know that when I'm here with you, I feel like maybe I could be whole again someday." "That's a lot of pressure to put on me," she said, but there was warmth in her voice now, not accusation. "I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm just asking you to let me stay. Let me keep working on the ranch, let me keep having suppers with you, let me keep being part of your life. We don't have to rush anything. We don't have to call it anything. Just let me stay." Olivia thought about the days ahead, about facing them with Ethan beside her instead of alone. She thought about laughter returning to her house, about having someone to talk to in the evenings, about the possibility of hope blooming where there had been only grief. "All right," she said finally. "You can stay. But slowly, Ethan. We do this slowly." A smile broke across his face, transforming it. "Slowly," he agreed. "However slow you need." They walked back to the house together as the sun set, still holding hands, and Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months, possibility. The next morning, Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Confused, she dressed quickly and went to the kitchen to find Ethan at her stove, cooking breakfast. "Morning," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind. I woke up early and thought I'd make myself useful." "You didn't have to do this," she said, but she was touched by the gesture. "I know. But I wanted to." He dished up eggs and bacon onto 2 plates. "Besides, I figured after working so hard to convince you to let me stay, I should probably demonstrate that I'm worth keeping around." She laughed, and it felt good to laugh, natural and easy. They ate together, talking about the day's work ahead, and Olivia realized how much lighter she felt. The burden she had been carrying alone for 6 months suddenly seemed more manageable with someone to share it. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Ethan continued to make repairs around the ranch, tackling projects that had seemed impossible when Olivia was facing them alone. He fixed the roof, reinforced the chicken coop, and even started work on extending the barn. And slowly, carefully, they grew closer. They worked side by side during the day, shared meals and quiet evenings on the porch. Ethan told her stories about his travels, about the places he had been and the people he had met. Olivia shared memories of Thomas, finding to her surprise that talking about him with Ethan didn't hurt the way it had with others. Ethan listened without pity, without trying to rush her past her grief, and that made all the difference. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Ethan reached over and took her hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it made Olivia's heart race. She didn't pull away, just sat there feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, the solidness of his presence beside her. "Is this all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "It's all right." They sat like that until full dark, hand in hand, neither needing to fill the silence with words, but their peace was not to last. A week later, Olivia went out to check on the cattle and found the fence broken again, but this time it was clearly deliberate. The posts had been sawed through, and the cows had wandered onto what was technically open range but would likely end up on Carl Morrison's property if they weren't found quickly. "Morrison," Ethan said grimly when she showed him. "This is escalating, Olivia. He's not just trying to pressure you anymore. He's actively sabotaging you." "I need to get those cows back," she said, fear tight in her chest. "They're all I have left. If I lose them, I won't be able to make it through the winter." "Then let's go get them." They saddled the horses and rode out, tracking the cows across the dry landscape. It took most of the day, but they finally found them grazing near a creek that bordered Morrison's land. As they were herding the cattle back, Carl Morrison and his sons appeared, blocking their path. "Those are my cows," Carl said. "Wandered onto my land, that makes them mine." "You know that's not how it works, Carl," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her anger and fear. "These are my cattle, they're branded with my mark, and they only got here because someone cut my fence." "Can you prove that?" Carl's smile was cold. "Seems to me your fence was just poorly maintained. Not surprising, given you've got no real help running that place." "I'm here," Ethan said quietly, "and those cattle are going back with us." Carl's expression hardened. "You might want to stay out of this, Vance. This is between me and the widow." "Anything involving Mrs. Edwards involves me now," Ethan said. He urged his horse forward, positioning himself between Carl and Olivia. "And we're taking the cattle home. You can accept that, or we can ride into town and explain to everyone why you're trying to steal marked cattle." For a tense moment, Olivia thought there would be violence. Carl's hand moved toward the rifle on his saddle, and his sons shifted in their saddles, ready to follow their father's lead. But then someone else rode up, an older man Olivia recognized as Judge Warren, who owned a small spread on the other side of White Oaks. "Problem here, Carl?" the judge asked, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. Carl's face flushed. "No problem, Judge. Just a misunderstanding about some cattle." "Cattle bearing the Edwards brand, I see," the judge observed. "Those would be Olivia's cattle, then. I'm sure you were just about to help her herd them home." It wasn't a question. Carl Morrison might be willing to bully a widow, but he wasn't stupid enough to cross Judge Warren, who held considerable influence in the area. "Of course," Carl said tightly. "Just wanted to make sure they got back safe." They herded the cattle back to Olivia's ranch in tense silence, Carl and his sons riding alongside until the cattle were safely in the repaired pasture. Only when they left did Olivia allow herself to breathe normally again. "That was too close," she said to Ethan. "It was, but we got them back." He looked at the cut fence. "We need to do something about Morrison, though. He's not going to stop." What can I do? I have no proof, and even if I did, who would I take it to? We'll figure something out, Ethan promised. I'm not letting him run you off this land. That night, Olivia lay awake worrying. Carl Morrison had more money, more men, and more influence than she could ever hope to have. If he was determined to drive her off her land, what could she and Ethan do to stop him? The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 days later, Judge Warren rode out to the ranch himself. "Mrs. Edwards," he said, tipping his hat as she came out to greet him. "I wanted to have a word with you about Carl Morrison." "I don't want any trouble, Judge," Olivia said carefully. "I know you don't. But I think you've got trouble whether you want it or not." He dismounted, and Ethan appeared from the barn to take his horse. "Morrison's been buying up properties all around here, pushing people out one way or another. You're not the first person he's pressured, just the first who's refused to buckle." "What can I do about it?" Olivia asked. "He's got money and power. I've got a failing ranch and debts. You've got something he wants, though, and that gives you leverage." The judge looked around the property appraisingly. "This land has the best water source in the area. That spring of yours never runs dry, and in this country, that makes it valuable. Morrison knows that. His ranch is big, but his water is unreliable. He needs your spring, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get it. So what do? I can't sell to him, and I can't fight him." "Maybe you don't have to do either." The judge looked at Ethan, who had joined them. "I've been watching you work this past month, Vance. You're a good hand, and you clearly care about this place. What are your intentions here?" Ethan straightened, meeting the judge's eyes directly. "My intention is to stay if Mrs. Edwards will have me, to help her build this ranch back up into what it could be. As an employee. As whatever she needs me to be." The judge looked between them, and Olivia felt her face heat under his scrutiny. But when he spoke, his voice was kind. "Here's what I'm thinking. If you two were to marry, you'd have a much stronger position. Morrison couldn't bully a married woman the way he can a widow. And with two people working the ranch, you'd have a real chance of making it profitable again." "Judge, we barely know each other," Olivia protested, even as her heart raced at the suggestion. "I've seen people who have known each other their whole lives and don't have what you two have," the judge said bluntly. "The way you look at each other, the way you work together, that's not nothing. And in practical terms, a marriage would solve a lot of your problems." After the judge left, Olivia and Ethan stood in awkward silence. The suggestion hung between them, too big to ignore but too complicated to address directly. "He's not wrong about the practical aspects," Ethan said finally. "Morrison would have a harder time running us off if we were married." "That's a terrible reason to get married," Olivia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It would be if that was the only reason." Ethan moved closer, his eyes searching hers. "But what if it's not? What if we're already heading in that direction anyway, and this is just moving up the timeline?" "Are we heading in that direction?" Olivia asked, needing to hear him say it. "I am," Ethan said simply. "I told you I wanted to stay, that I wanted to be part of your life. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger." He took her hands in his. "I know it's fast. I know there are 100 reasons to wait. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and when you find something good, something real, you should hold on to it." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "I care about you, Ethan, more than I thought I could care about anyone again." "But is that enough? Is caring about someone enough reason to marry them?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think maybe we could build from there. Build something strong and lasting, the way we've been building up this ranch. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile is." She thought about the weeks they had spent working side by side, about the comfort she found in his presence, about the way her heart lifted when she saw him each morning. She thought about the loneliness of the past 6 months and the way it had eased since Ethan arrived. She thought about Thomas and the love they had shared, and realized with a start that what she felt for Ethan didn't diminish that. Love wasn't finite. The heart could hold both grief for what was lost and hope for what might be found. "Ask me properly," she said quietly. Ethan's eyes widened, hope flaring in them. He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty yard, still holding her hands. "Olivia Edwards, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't promise it will be easy or that I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll work hard every day to make you happy, to be worthy of the gift you're giving me. I'll stand beside you, help you keep this ranch and build a life with you, if you'll have me." "Yes," Olivia said, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She buried her face in his chest, feeling his heart pounding as hard as hers. When she pulled back to look at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. "When?" he asked. "Soon," she said. "Before Carl Morrison can cause more trouble. Before I lose my nerve." They were married 3 days later by Judge Warren in his home, with Martha Preston and her husband as witnesses. Martha had nearly fainted when Olivia told her the news, torn between delight at having been proven right about the impropriety and disappointment that she hadn't been able to prevent what she saw as an overly hasty marriage. Olivia wore a simple blue dress, not wanting to wear black to her wedding but not ready for white either. Ethan wore a new shirt and vest purchased in town, looking handsome and nervous. The ceremony was brief, the words binding them together feeling both momentous and terrifyingly real. When Judge Warren pronounced them husband and wife and told Ethan he could kiss his bride, Olivia's heart hammered. It would be their first kiss, she realized. In all the weeks of growing closer, they had held hands and sat close but had never kissed. Ethan cupped her face gently in his hands, his eyes questioning, giving her a chance to pull back if she wanted. She didn't want to. She rose on her toes and kissed him, tentatively at first, then with growing warmth as he responded. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and for a moment the world fell away. When they pulled apart, Martha was fanning herself with her handkerchief, and Judge Warren was smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Vance," he said. "Mrs. Vance." The name sounded strange to Olivia's ears, but not wrong. Different, but full of possibility. They rode back to the ranch together as the sun set, and Olivia felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside her. Happiness, yes, but also nervousness and a lingering guilt that she was moving on from Thomas. As if sensing her thoughts, Ethan reached over and took her hand. "You all right?" he asked. "I think so. It's just a lot to process." "We don't have to rush anything," he said. "Just because we're married doesn't mean everything has to change overnight. We can take this as slow as you need." She squeezed his hand gratefully. "Thank you for understanding." That night, they navigated the awkwardness of being newlyweds with careful courtesy. Ethan moved his things from the barn room into the house, but Olivia showed him to the small spare bedroom. "I know we're married," she said, her face heating, "but I need a little time before we're fully married, if that makes sense." "It makes perfect sense," Ethan assured her. "I meant what I said. We go at your pace." Over the next weeks, they settled into married life. Some things changed immediately. Ethan sleeping in the house, eating all meals together, making decisions jointly about the ranch. Other things changed more slowly. The careful distance between them gradually shrinking, casual touches becoming more frequent. The spare bedroom door staying open more often as they talked late into the night. Carl Morrison came by once after hearing about the marriage, his face red with anger. "You think this changes anything?" he demanded. "You're still going to fail, just with 2 people instead of 1. "Maybe," Ethan said mildly, "but we'll fail together, and that makes all the difference. Now get off our property before I have Judge Warren send the marshal out here for trespassing." After Morrison left, Olivia turned to Ethan with shining eyes. "Our property," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," he said, pulling her close. As fall turned to winter, the ranch began to show real improvement. With 2 people working it, repairs that had seemed impossible were completed. They bought more cattle with money from selling Olivia's vegetables at the harvest market. They even hired occasional help from town for bigger projects, establishing the ranch as a going concern rather than a failing venture. And gradually, carefully, Olivia and Ethan became not just partners but truly husband and wife. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, when the careful distance finally dissolved completely. Maybe it was the night she found Ethan on the porch, staring at the stars with tears running down his face, and instead of leaving him to his grief, she sat beside him and held him while he cried for Sarah. Maybe it was the morning she woke from a nightmare about Thomas's death and found Ethan already awake, pulling her into his arms and soothing her back to sleep. Or maybe it was the evening they were sitting together by the fire, and Olivia realized she wasn't thinking about the work ahead or the problems they faced. She was just thinking about how good it felt to be there with him, about how his laugh made her smile, about how she looked forward to seeing him every morning. "I love you," she said suddenly, surprising herself. Ethan looked at her, his eyes wide. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, more certain now. "I didn't mean to, I wasn't looking for it, but it happened anyway and I needed you to know." A slow smile spread across his face. "I love you too," he said. "I have for weeks now, but I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it." "I'm ready now," she said. "For all of it." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and when he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." That night they finally became husband and wife in every sense. Ethan was gentle and patient, and Olivia found herself responding to him with a passion she had thought died with Thomas. It wasn't the same as what she had with Thomas, she realized. It was different, built on different foundations, but it was just as real and just as precious. Afterwards, lying in Ethan's arms in the bed that had been hers alone for so long, Olivia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The guilt she had been carrying eased, not disappearing completely but settling into something she could live with. Thomas would have wanted her to be happy, she realized, would have wanted her to live and love again, not to spend the rest of her life frozen in grief. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for being patient, for helping me believe I could have this again." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter who showed up at your fence. You saved my life, Olivia. You just didn't know it." As winter deepened, they prepared for the challenges ahead. The ranch was in better shape than it had been in years, but they still faced struggles. Money was tight, supplies were expensive, and Carl Morrison, while less aggressive, had not given up his designs on their water rights. One cold January morning, Olivia woke feeling ill. She barely made it outside before she was sick, and when Ethan found her, his face was tight with worry. "Should I ride for the doctor?" he asked. "No," she said, realization dawning. "No, I don't think I need a doctor." "But you're sick." "I'm not sick, Ethan, I'm pregnant." His eyes went wide. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. I'm late and I've been tired and now this." She gestured at the evidence of her morning sickness. "I think we're going to have a baby." For a moment, Ethan just stared at her. Then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "We're having a baby," he shouted to the empty ranch. "Olivia, we're having a baby." His joy was infectious, and Olivia found herself laughing too, despite her lingering nausea. A baby. A new life growing inside her, a symbol of the future she and Ethan were building together, The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from sickness for months, and as she grew larger, the ranch work became more difficult. But Ethan was tireless, taking on her share of the work along with his own, insisting she rest whenever she looked tired. "I'm not made of glass," she protested one day when he tried to carry a bucket of water for her. "I know. You're made of steel and stubbornness, but you're also carrying our child, and I'm going to take care of both of you whether you like it or not." She kissed him, touched by his protectiveness even when it frustrated her independent nature. In early summer, on a day when the heat pressed down like a blanket, Olivia's labor began. Ethan rode hard for town to fetch the midwife, and by the time they returned, Olivia's pains were coming strong and fast. The labor was long and difficult. Olivia had never been so exhausted, so overwhelmed, so certain she couldn't go on. But Ethan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. "You can do this," he told her. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." And finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. The midwife placed him in Olivia's arms, a squalling, red-faced bundle of new life, and Olivia felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. "A boy," she whispered. "Ethan, we have a son." Ethan was crying openly, looking down at the baby with wonder. "He's perfect. He's absolutely perfect." They named him James Thomas Vance, honoring both their fathers and the husband Olivia had lost. When she held little James for the first time with Ethan's arms around them both, Olivia felt like her life had come full circle. She had known such profound loss, such deep grief, but she had also found unexpected love and now this incredible gift of new life. Carl Morrison came by a week later, ostensibly to offer congratulations but really to assess their situation. He found Ethan working on expanding the barn to accommodate the growing herd, while Olivia sat on the porch with the baby. "Heard you had a child," Carl said, without much warmth. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Olivia said, her arms tightening protectively around James. Carl looked around the ranch, his expression sour. "Place is looking good, better than I expected." "That happens when people work together," Ethan said, joining Olivia on the porch, "when they build something instead of trying to tear other people down." Carl's face reddened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "I'll be going then. Just wanted to pay my respects." After he left, Ethan sat down beside Olivia, carefully taking James from her arms. He looked down at their son with such love that Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am. How a year ago I was alone and lost, and now I have a wife I love and a son and a home. How you took a chance on a stranger and gave me everything that matters." "We saved each other," Olivia said. "When you first came here, you said not until I fix what's broken. You fixed the fences and the barn and the windmill, but you fixed me too, Ethan. You fixed my broken heart." "And you fixed mine," he said softly. He leaned over and kissed her, careful of the baby between them. "I love you, Olivia Vance. I love you and our son and this life we're building." "I love you too," she said, "more than I ever thought possible." The years that followed were not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when money was tight and they worried about making it through. Carl Morrison continued to cause occasional trouble, though never again as aggressively as before. And there were personal struggles too, moments when Olivia still grieved for Thomas, or when Ethan woke from nightmares about Sarah. But there were far more good times than bad. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved the ranch and the animals. 2 years after his birth, they had a daughter they named Sarah Marie, and 2 years after that, another son they named David. The house that had been so quiet when Ethan first arrived now rang with children's laughter and the organized chaos of family life. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They never became wealthy, but they built something sustainable and successful. Other small ranchers began coming to them for advice, and Ethan's reputation as an honest, skilled rancher grew. Olivia started a small school on the property, teaching not just their own children but those from neighboring ranches, finding joy in returning to the teaching she had loved before marrying Thomas. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Olivia up to the ridge overlooking the ranch. They stood together, his arms around her, looking down at the land they had built together. "Remember when I first rode up to your fence?" he asked. "How could I forget? I wanted to shoot you." He laughed. "You told me to leave, and I said not until I fixed what was broken." "You did fix it," she said. "Fixed everything. The fences, the barn, the windmill, me. We fixed each other," he corrected. "And we built this." He gestured at the ranch below, at the sturdy buildings and healthy cattle, at the house where their children played. "This is what was broken. This ranch, both of us. And we fixed it by fixing it together." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. There were lines around his eyes now and silver threading through his hair. She knew she had changed too, was no longer the grief-stricken widow he had first met. They had both been transformed by the years and the love they had shared. "I'm glad you didn't leave," she said. "I'm glad you let me stay." They kissed as the sun set, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Olivia thought about how strange life was. How loss could lead to new love, how brokenness could be the foundation for something stronger. How a dusty cowboy showing up at her fence on a random morning could change everything. Below them, in the house they had built together, their children laughed and played. Around them, the ranch they had saved together thrived. And in that moment, standing on the ridge with the man she loved, Olivia felt complete in a way she hadn't thought possible after Thomas died. She had loved and lost and loved again, and that second love didn't diminish the first. It simply showed her that the human heart was vast enough to hold both grief and joy, loss and hope, endings and new beginnings. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan. "For what?" "For not leaving when I told you to. For being stubborn and insistent and refusing to give up. For seeing what could be here when I could only see what was broken. You would have found a way without me," he said. "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "This life we have, this family, this home, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that." "We gave it to each other," he said. "That's what makes it worth having." As they walked back down to the house hand in hand, the lights glowing warm in the windows, Olivia felt profoundly grateful. Grateful for the love she had found, for the family they had built, for every ordinary, extraordinary moment of the life they shared. She had been so certain, that morning Ethan rode up, that nothing good could come to her ranch anymore. How wrong she had been. The best thing that ever happened to her had arrived on that dusty morning, and she had almost sent it away. But she hadn't. She had taken a chance, and he had kept his word. He had fixed what was broken, piece by piece, fence post by fence post, wound by wound. And in the fixing, they had built something new and beautiful and lasting. Inside the house, their children called for them, and they went to answer, stepping together into the warm light and the noise and the beautiful chaos of family. Outside, the ranch settled into twilight, solid and enduring, a testament to what two broken people could build when they chose to fix things together instead of facing them alone. And if sometimes, in quiet moments, Olivia thought of Thomas with tender remembrance, or Ethan thought of Sarah with bittersweet memory, well, that was all right too. Those loves were part of who they had been, part of what made them who they were now. The past didn't have to be erased for the future to be bright. It was all woven together, the grief and the joy, the loss and the love, creating something complex and rich and wholly their own. Years later, when James was grown and working the ranch alongside his father, when Sarah Marie was teaching in the school her mother had started, when David was planning to marry a girl from town, Olivia and Ethan would sit on the porch they had repaired together and watch the sunset paint the sky. "No regrets?" Ethan would ask. "None," Olivia would answer. "Not a single one." And it would be true. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been worth it for this. A life lived fully, love given and received, a family raised, a home built, a ranch saved. What more could anyone ask for? The ranch would pass to their children and eventually to their grandchildren, each generation building on what came before. The fence that Ethan had first repaired would be rebuilt and repaired countless times, but some of his original posts would remain, weathered but strong, a reminder of where it all began. The barn he had fixed would shelter animals for decades. The windmill he had repaired would pump water long after they were gone. But more than the physical things they built, Ethan and Olivia left behind a legacy of love and perseverance, of two wounded people who found each other and built something beautiful from their brokenness. Their story would be told to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a testament to the power of taking chances, of letting people in, of refusing to give up on what matters. It had started with a simple declaration: "Not until I fix what's broken here." And in the end, what Ethan fixed wasn't just fences and barns and windmills. He fixed a heart, a life, a future. And Olivia fixed him right back, giving him a reason to stop running, a place to belong, a love worth staying for. On the day Olivia passed away, many years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren, with Ethan holding her hand just as he had through so many moments of their life together, her last words were simple: "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too," Ethan said, tears running down his weathered face. "Me too, my love." And when Ethan followed her a few years later, he was buried beside her on the ranch they had saved together, under a sky as wide and blue as the one that had stretched above them on the day they met. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names and the years of their lives, but at the bottom was an inscription chosen by their children. He came to fix what was broken. She gave him a reason to stay. Together they built a life, and really that said it all. Everything that mattered, everything that endured, could be found in those simple words. Two broken people, one failing ranch, and the love that saved them all. The end of their story was really just the beginning of a legacy that would continue for generations. A testament to what could be built when people chose love over fear, hope over despair, together over alone. And every fence post that stood straight, every barn door that opened smoothly, every drop of water that flowed from the old windmill was a reminder of the day a cowboy rode up to a widow's ranch and refused to leave until he fixed what was broken, not knowing that the most important thing he would fix was not made of wood or metal, but of flesh and blood and a heart that had forgotten how to hope. In the end, that was the miracle. Not that things were fixed, but that two people found each other in their brokenness and discovered that together they were whole.